Welcome back, Finer Things Club League owners. That wraps up our regular season. 15 weeks in the books. We are all done with the regular season, and for 4 teams remaining, it is the most wonderful time of the year. Shout out to those 4 teams who have locked in their chances to win it all, to put themselves in the history books and on the trophy of the Finer Things Club championship lore. Put themselves in the history books as champions. One team will do it this year. 25% chance to win it all now if you are JT, Frank, Nate, or Jordan. So without further ado, let's get into that rundown, shall we?
Do you have a rundown that I could take a look at just so I know what type of rundown you're looking for?
Just keep it simple.
Keeping it simple, that's what I'm doing. But I am working hard on this one, real hard.
You're working hard on this?
No, not too hard, not harder than I should.
Right. I mean, why work harder than you should?
No,
All right, let's head into the matchups of this week, starting with the number 10 team, Justice Beaver, taking on the number 8 team, Prison Mike. Justice Beaver at 2-13, taking on Prison Mike at 4-11, and Prison Mike doing light work, making light work of Justice Beaver, 142 to 105. Josh Allen going absolute berserk on Saturday, 4 touchdowns. Did fumble twice, but did cash in on 77 rushing yards, 36.86 points on the week. Adds another 14 from Najee Harris, who's been a quite nice acquisition mid-season, regardless of playoff contention or not. Jamar Chase adds 19 points. DJ Moore also adds 18, and Michael Pittman adding 19 as well. Taysom Hill, the tight end, 2 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown to add with 7 carries and 30 yards, 11.2 points on the day. Brian Robinson adds another 10 as well. On to Justice Beaver. Joe Burrow does put up a nice 23 points on the day. But Jahan Dotson with a nice performance, 4 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown, 21.5 points. Juju Smith-Schuster with 10 catches and 88 yards, putting up 15 points. Darren Waller adds 13 to that total as well. Again, Prison Mike getting a win, going to 4-11. Justice Beaver moving to 2-13, dropping his 12th straight loss. Unreal. Moving on, Prince Family Paper, Big Boobs, 2 teams completely out of playoff contention. 2 teams, though, who are still finishing strong, although Prince Family Paper puts up a strong 165 points to Jake's Big Boobs' 129. It is a nice win for Prince Family Paper as he gets 20 points from Dak Prescott. DeAndre Swift with 12.5 points. Christian McCaffrey continues to just have a ridiculous season now with the 49ers, 25 points on the day. Christian Kirk adds 15. A.J. Brown, 9 catches, 181 yards, 28 points on the day. Garrett Wilson adds 13. Travis Kelce, welcome back to the rightful place at the top end of this tight end rankings of the week. 20.5 points, 10 catches for 105 yards. And Keenan Allen adding 16 points to the total. On to Big Boobs' side, Ryan Tannehill, only 10 points on the day. Aaron Jones does pick up 19. Jerick McKinnon, 34 points, just goes off. 10 carries, 52 yards, a touchdown on the ground, and then another 8 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown in the air, and also picks up a 2-point conversion. Jerry Jeudy adds 14. T. Higgins puts up 16 points, and Brett Maher, the kicker, does add 12 to the total. Jake now drops his 3rd straight, moving to 5-10. Prince Family Paper picks up a win, moves to 8-7. And we move on to the last irrelevant matchup of this week. My team, Captain Bruisin, at 8-6, taking on Kyler's Bums from the Dock at 6-8, and Kyler picks up a 0.6 point margin of victory. Brock Purdy with the spot start, looking pretty good. 18 points on the day and the victory. Cordero Patterson adds 12 to his total. Mike Evans putting up 13 points. Jalen Waddle with a big reception adding to his day, putting up 22 points. And George Kittle with 2 tutties, 27.3 points on the day. And that is just barely enough as Captain Bruisin pulls a bit of a move last minute, pulling Van Jefferson for Mercedes Lewis, trying to get an improved spot in the draft order, and just barely does. Tom Brady, the newly acquired quarterback, 15.5 points. Tony Pollard with a modest 14 points. Justin Jefferson, 12 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown. 30.3 points on the day. Terry McLaurin with 13. Deontay Johnson, 10 catches, 98 yards, 20 points on the day. And Nick Folk, 13 points out of the kicker spot. Again, loses, drops to 8 and 7. Kyler wins, moves to 7 and 8. And we move on to the first of the 2 playoff hopeful matchups, as Nate Hyde's Jans Cans at 10 and 4 takes on JT's They Call Me Toby at 9 and 5. Jans Cans with another victory, 155 to 137. Patrick Mahomes is really starting to take off into MVP form. 32 points on the day. Austin Eckler steady Eddie, 15 points on his day. Alvin Kamara, 12 points on his performance. Tyreek Hill adds 21.9, so almost 22 points. Stephon Diggs with a quiet day for Diggs anyway, only 10.7 points. Tyler Lockett adds 13 points to his performance. Evan Ingram now, second straight week with a really nice performance, 14.2 points. DeAndre Hopkins adds 13, and Zeke Elliott adds 15 points to his day as he is salvaged by the rushing touchdown. On to They Call Me Toby's side. Jalen Hurts has a ridiculous game, outdoing Patrick Mahomes even, outdoing Josh Allen even, with 37.7 points, but it does come at the expense of an injury, and we will talk more about that in a little bit. Joe Mixon adds 10 points. David Montgomery has a big day, 24 points for David Montgomery. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, the newly acquired receiver, adding 15 points to his total. Devontae Smith now is really starting to heat up. 18 points on the day, 5 catches for 126 yards. And that is it for the notable performances. Jans Cans now moves to 11 and 4. As They Call Me Toby moves to 9 and 6. And we move to the last matchup, and that is Team Uncle Creepies at 10 and 4, taking on the 10 and 4 Jordan's Somehow I Manage. Somehow manages his way into a victory late into the week of the matchup, 142 to 139 with a 3-point victory. Jared Goff continues to just put up nice numbers, 16 points on the day. Josh Jacobs adding 12, and Saquon Barkley really adding to this team's dynamic at 23 points. DK Metcalf adding 12.5. Chris Godwin, the newly acquired receiver, puts up 8 catches, 83 yards, and a tutty. Derrick Henry. Derrick rumbling, bumbling, stumbling. Henry adding 25 points to his day, 104 yards on the ground, a touchdown, 4 catches for 59 yards as well, as that is a bit uncharacteristic for King Henry. And Mike Williams adding 10 points. On Uncle Creepy's side, the most up-and-coming, emerging, amazing quarterback in the National Football League, that is Trevor Lawrence, leading his team 4 touchdowns in the air, 28 points on the day, beating those Dallas Cowboys at home against Dallas. How you doing? Dalvin Cook, 29 points on the day, big day, 17 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown, and then adding another receiving touchdown. Adam Thielen with 13, CeeDee Lamb adding 19.7, and Ramondre Stevenson with 172 rushing yards and a touchdown. Big day, 24.8 points on the day. It's not enough. Team Uncle Creepies moves to 10 and 5. Jordan Somehow I Manage now with a 7th straight victory at 11 and 4, and that is your weekly rundown. All right, and so let's talk about some of these matchups. Most of these matchups actually were pretty irrelevant all things considered, there were a couple that mattered for seeding in the playoffs. There was also two matchups that determine draft order for the up-and-coming 2023 fantasy draft in the Finer Things Club. Let's start there. Prince Family Paper picks up a win over Big Boobs, moves to 8-7, and now overtakes Captain Bruisin in the standings, which means he finishes 5th in the regular season standings and picks up the 6th pick in the fantasy football draft. Captain Bruisin, as I mentioned in the rundown, that's myself, pulls Van Jefferson last minute as he realizes he has no shot for the side pot. Puts in Mercedes Lewis, who is active and does pick up a catch and almost wins against Bums from the Dock. Gains the favorable draft position since he owns not only his pick but Bums from the Dock's pick as well. Moving to the playoff teams, this is quite remarkable as all 4 teams in the playoffs were playing each other the last week of the regular season, and now we know our seeding, and we will talk about that as we recap our playoff matchups later in this recap. But before we do anything, let's go over one more time our power rankings for the 2022 Finer Things Club season.
Don't slip up or get caught.
Why not, man?
I'm coming for that #1 spot. All right. Rappers swearing they on top. But I'm coming for that #1 spot. All right, man. Scheme.
Power rankings, the last of this season. So enjoy it while you can. The 2022 final power rankings of the regular season are as follows. At 10, finishing at 2-13 is Justice Beaver. That's Nathan Pierce's team, losing 11 straight 12 straight matchups this season. That is quite remarkable as his team started off hot. And when I mean hot, I mean he had 2 wins early in the season and hasn't won since. Number 10 in the power rankings. Number 9, Jake's Big Boobs at 5-10 is lower in the power rankings than Matt's Prison Mike at 4-11. The power rankings knows a good team when they see one. Prison Mike at number 8 over Big Boobs, even though he has 1 less win. Speaking of power rankings, knowing the difference, Bums from the Dock coming in at number 7 at 7-8. Not quite enough to overtake my team, Captain Bruisin, in the power rankings at number 6 at 8-7. Number 5, Somehow I Manage. Can we get a little bit of a conversation here? Winning 7 straight weeks, 11-4, 3 more wins than the number 4 team that is in front of him at Prince Family Paper at 8-7, number 4 in the power rankings. Can we talk about the disrespect on Somehow I Manage? Can we get some disrespectful comments out of here? As Jordan Somehow I Manage is at number 5, 11-4, 7 straight wins, cruising in the playoffs, to be overtaken by Lance's Prince Family Paper at 8-7. Unreal. I mean, we're literally talking about 16 points in the score difference, so it's very close. Number 3 is Uncle Creepy's at 10-5. Number 2 and number 1 are the same 1 and 2 teams as we've had for now several weeks. They call me Toby. Number 2 at 9-6, and number 1 is Jan's Cans at 11-4. So to recap the rankings, the power rankings: number 10, Justice Beaver; number 9, Big Boobs; number 8, Prison Mike; number 7, Bums from the Dock; number 6, Captain Bruisin; number 5, Somehow I Manage; number 4, Prince Family Paper; number 3, Uncle Creepy's; number 2, They Call Me Toby; and number 1 is Jan's Cans.
What if the owner of Prince Family Paper has a beautiful daughter and we have to seduce her in order to get their secrets?
I will seduce her.
No, I want to seduce her.
I'll seduce her.
Let me seduce her.
No,
Michael,
no,
please.
no.
Can I
I
seduce
got
her?
it.
You'll fall in love with her.
Yeah? So what if I did? That would take precedence and I would expect your support.
Okay, so let's go over the plan again.
All right. I am a local business owner.
Mm-hmm.
I need to buy paper.
Yep.
I find out everything about their prices and policies.
Your fictitious name?
Michael Scarn. All right. Here come the sharks. Ba-dum. 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 In nature, there's something called the food chain. It is where the shark eats the little shark, and the little shark eats the littler shark, and so on and so on and so on until you get down to the single cell shark. So now, replace sharks with paper companies, and that is all you need to know about business.
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up. All the way up.
All the way up again goes to none other than Lance Batiste's Prince Family Paper, scoring the most points this past week. Even though he is out of playoff contention, it is very fair to say that this team is dangerous. Scoring, again, the most points this week as he won Side Pot earlier this year. This team is built good. It's built well. Good. It's built good. It's built well. Dak got the start, put up 20 points through a costly game-losing interception, threw 2 on the day, but did put up 20 points. CMC continues to be the anchor in what I gotta believe Nate's James Cans is kicking themselves over trading earlier this year. A.J. Brown, monster day, 28 points. Travis Kelce coming back to be his dominant self with 20 points. And Keenan Allen, another solid acquisition from Prince Family Paper. And that's what put him over the top. His max points for was only 170, so he almost got every bit of the juice on that squeeze as Prince Family Paper picks up a win, does finish the season with a winning record. So congratulations to Prince Family Paper. Sorry you didn't make the playoffs, but you have a strong team, and it's built for the future as well. So bright things ahead for Prince Family Paper. And let's move on to the individual awards. Before we talk about playoff matchups. At quarterback, we have Jalen Hurts, 37.7 points. They call me Toby's quarterback, number 1 quarterback of the week. Just behind him is Prison Mike's quarterback, Matt Washawn's Josh Allen at 36.9 points. Followed by Kirk Cousins, Kyler's Buns from the Dock quarterback, 36.4 points on the week. On to running back, surprise, Jerick McKinnon, the number 1 running back on the week. Jake's Big Boobs at 34.2 points on the week. Followed by 2 mainstays, Dalvin Cook, Team Uncle Creepy's running back at 29 points, and Lance's Prince Family Paper, Christian McCaffrey at 25.8 points on the week. On to wide receiver. This is an odd one. Nate Hyde's Jans Cans wide receiver, Zay Jones, 36.9 points on the day, the leading scorer for wide receivers, and ties Josh Allen for the number 2 scoring player in all fantasy football this week at number 1. Number 2 is a guy who is not even on a team in the Finer Things Club. Miami Hurricanes wide receiver, now my Minnesota Vikings wide receiver, KJ Osborne at 32.7 points on the day. And at number 3, another Vikings wide receiver, one that you know much more familiar with than KJ Osborne. That is Justin Jefferson, Captain Bruisin, my team's wide receiver. On to tight end, George Kittle, 27.3 points, leads all tight ends. Kyler's Bums from the Dock tight end, followed by Nate Hyde's Jans Cans Dawson Knox, 22.8 points on the week. And number 3 is a guy who is not on a team yet again, Jawan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints, facing the Atlanta Falcons. 22.7 points on the week. On to kicker. The top 2 scoring kickers this week, not on a team. What is we doing, baby? Chase McLaughlin of the Indianapolis Colts, 5 field goals made, 21 points on the day. Matt Prater, number 2 of the Arizona Cardinals, 14 points on the day. And number 3, my kicker, Captain Bruisin's New England Patriots, Nick Folk at 13 points on the day. We normally close out the show, but we got playoff matchups to talk about, so let's dive right in.
And that was a disgraceful performance, in my opinion. We threw that game. We gave it away by doing that. We gave them the friggin' game. In my opinion, that sucked. What's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
All right, so let's talk about the playoffs. We now have our 4 teams heading into crucial playoff matchups. But before we do that, I'd like to revisit the 2021 season and see what happened last year in the playoffs and how that transpired. And so as we look into the playoffs of last season, we will notice that we have a couple of repeat teams. Last season, the number 1 team was Kyler's Bumps from the Dock, taking on Jake's Big Boobs at number 4. So just to remind you, Jake was a playoff team last year. My, have things changed. Number 2 is Uncle Creepy's taking on the number 3 team, Jordan's Snip Snap last year. So Frank and Jordan played last year in the playoffs, as they are the 2 repeat playoff teams, as Kyler and Jake find themselves on the outside looking in replacement of Nate's Jan's Cans and JT's They Call Me Toby. Last year, Kyler wiped the floor with Jake's team 146-89 in the first round, and so did Jordan do the same with Frank's Uncle Creepy's 145-106, as we saw Kyler and Jordan play in a game that had just a 4-point difference in the championship. We know how that went. And so now as we look ahead to this season, something pretty remarkable happened, and I think it's worth talking about. This year, the number 10 and number 9 team that finished last season both finished 1 and 2 in the power rankings, which is pretty remarkable, and both of those teams finished in the top 4 to gain playoff spots. It is truly, truly remarkable and unfortunate that these 2 teams now have to play each other in the first round, as we possibly could have seen JT's They Call Me Toby face Nate Hyde's Jan's Cans in the championship after finishing 2-13 last year. It won't happen that way, but they deserve truly an amazing round of applause, as those 2 teams have turned around their season and have great teams. So starting with the number 1 and the number 4 team in the seeding, that is Nate's Jan's Cans taking on They Call Me Toby in the first round of the playoffs. And let's talk about the matchup, shall we? We have Jan's Cans, the number 1 team this season, also finished the league with the most points scored, actually taking on the team with the second most points scored. And so it's unfortunate that those teams now have to play each other in the first round, as Jan's Cans, number 1 in points, taking on They Call Me Toby, number 2 in points. Again, the 10 and 9 teams last season facing off in the first round of the playoffs, looking really strong heading in. JT did lose this past week, does finish as the 4 seed at 9-6, but to overlook his team would be quite the mistake. He is projected right now, if things were to stay true in both of their lineups, to score 144 points to Jan's Cans 160 points. So there is quite a difference there in the projection. But however, it certainly does not mean that it is a cakewalk. Let's start on JT's They Call Me Toby side. He has quite a dilemma. It's not a dilemma. He knows who will start at quarterback, but Jalen Hurts this year, the number 1 quarterback and the number 1 player overall in fantasy points this season, has finished the last 3 weeks with 36, 32, and 37 points respectively, just dominating fantasy football. Now goes out with an injury, will not play this weekend, but because They Call Me Toby is a playoff team and is built differently, has Justin Fields as his backup, who was mocked for the first part of the season, starting off scoring 15, 7, 2, 10 points, now has racked up 44, 42, 21, 23, 21 points against good teams. He does face a tough Buffalo Bills defense. It will be a pivotal part of this matchup, is to see how Justin Fields can respond to getting the start for They Call Me Toby. As for his running backs, I would say this is the weakest part of They Call Me Toby's team, as he will have Joe Mixon and Leonard Fournette probably starting, and then David Montgomery being somewhere in the mix. He does have Samaje Perine as a valuable handcuff to Joe Mixon. Perine has filled in the gaps really nicely, but now has moved into more of a backup role. Joe Mixon does face a tough New England defense coming up this week, but Fournette does draw a very favorable matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. Where the strength really lies in They Call Me Toby's team is at wide receiver, as he has Devontae Adams and now has traded for Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. Those two will inevitably get the start, as well as Devontae Smith, who will also get a start, but now has Gardner Minshew throwing to him against a Dallas Cowboys defense. Tight end was looking to be also very strong for They Call Me Toby, but Mark Andrews, since Lamar Jackson has been out, has really struggled, has not scored double digits since week 12. So that is something to watch for as well. Chris Olave has also come back down to earth a little bit over the last few weeks, scoring 11, 10, and 8. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think we have a good understanding, a good idea of where the starters are for They Call Me Toby. He will just need them to really pull out some big points from a few of his players. On to Jans Cans. His quarterback is to not be truffled with. Patrick Mahomes is the number 2 quarterback. So we had the number 1 and number 2 teams, or number 2 quarterbacks and players in fantasy football going to square off against each other. It didn't work out that way, but Patrick Mahomes now draws a very favorable matchup against the Seahawks in this playoff matchup. Patrick Mahomes looks like an MVP this season, put up 32 points this past week, and is dangerous. Austin Eckler, we know who he is, number 1 running back in fantasy this season, just almost never scores under 15 points. It's happened so few times. He draws a favorable matchup against the Indianapolis Colts this week. We all know Alvin Kamara is on Nate's Jans Cans team, and he has not played particularly well, but does get a good matchup against the Browns. Did put up 12 points this week against the crappy Falcons defense. But his strength also lies in his receivers, as does JT's team, as he has Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs holding down those wide receiver spots. You just know at any given point those two guys can take over a game and go off. Stephon Diggs, it is notable. Stephon Diggs has been a bit of an up and down player as of recently, but we know what he is capable of. He does face a tough Chicago defense on the road at Chicago. Tyreek Hill does face a good defense in Green Bay as well. Really what is in question here is what Nate's Jans Cans will do in the second half of his lineup. He has Zay Jones in his starting lineup this week. What a start. He didn't have Zay Jones in the lineup, but looks to might have him this coming week as they face the Jets. So that's a tough matchup. Zay Jones has balled out recently with the ascension of Trevor Lawrence. He has Evan Ingram as a tight end option. He has Dawson Knox as a tight end option, who is very up and down. And then he also has Tyler Lockett as an option as well. Tyler Lockett does face the Kansas City Chiefs in a good matchup. And then Latavius Murray, the wild card. I'm sure Nate is trying to figure out what to do, as he has a good problem on his hands. Has a number of guys that he can start in the flex positions this week. DeAndre Hopkins obviously has to get primary consideration, facing a decent matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. On to the other matchup, we have the number 2 and 3 teams. Jordan's Somehow I Managed facing off against Uncle Creepy's. If the matchup were to be played today, Sleeper projects this one to be much closer than the first matchup, as only 8 points decide the difference between the two. They have Jordan projected at 145, Team Uncle Creepy's at 137. Let's start on Uncle Creepy's side. We've said it all season. This is a very lucky team. That's not to say that there aren't some ballers on his team, as we will go through that in just a minute, but it is notable to say that Frank at 10-5 has caught some breaks along the way. That is for certain. This team certainly is not a juggernaut, but it is built well. Trevor Lawrence will get the start at quarterback as Mike White is out and Desmond Ridder is not good. So we know Trevor Lawrence will get the start at quarterback, is a bit banged up, but he draws a tough matchup against the New York Jets this week. So that will be a tough start. Nick Chubb is his running back. Chubb and Dalvin Cook are his two solid running backs as one can have on a team. Number 6 and number 10 in fantasy points this season at the running back position. But Nick Chubb has really struggled in fantasy recently. 4 of the last 5 weeks have been under double digits. He does face a decent run defense matchup against the New Orleans Saints. Dalvin Cook comes off a 29-point monster of a game and now faces a good matchup against the New York Giants at home. So be looking for Dalvin Cook to really look to carry Frank's team this week. Where JT and Nate's strengths lied in the receiver, his strength really comes from his running backs. His wide receiver core is not as strong as Adam Thielen, DJ Shark, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Boyd, and Deebo Samuel are his wide receivers. Deebo looks to be out for the remainder of the season. Sky Moore is not a reliable option, so it is going to be running backs who look to carry Frank's Team Uncle Creepies this week. CeeDee Lamb, the lone reliable wide receiver on the depth chart, putting up a solid 15+ nearly every single week. Does draw a tough Eagles matchup though, so really needing big points from his running backs as he has Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson in his flex spots as of now. It'll probably stay that way unless he decides to start Tyler Boyd, who faces a tough New England matchup. So Frank has a tough matchup schedule ahead of him. As we move to Somehow I Manage though, his strength also comes from running backs. We've been talking about it all year in the chat. Jared Goff has been drawing the start most weeks, but he has reliable backup quarterbacks, Derek Carr and Daniel Jones. All 3 of these guys are certainly not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, but these guys can get it done depending on a matchup week to week. It'll be interesting to see where he goes for his quarterback spot. Jared Goff faces a Carolina defense on the road. Derek Carr draws a very favorable defense on the road, but against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Daniel Jones draws a very, very nice matchup on the road at the Vikings. So all 3 quarterbacks going on the road, but a couple of them drawing some really nice defensive matchups, at least statistically speaking. As of running back, we know who's going to get the start. It's going to be Josh Jacobs and it's going to be Saquon Barkley. These 2 guys are elite. Josh Jacobs Josh Jacobs at number 2 on the season at running back, finishing right behind Austin Eckler, and Saquon Barkley at number 5. So 2 of the top 5 starting running backs this year in fantasy football are starting for Somehow I Manage. Moving to wide receiver, it gets a little more questionable. DK Metcalf having a great season. Wide receiver 1 finish on the regular season, finishing at 12 on the year, is reliable, can have a big day, but is just not a guy who is going to go out and typically get that 30-point, that 35-point matchup. But he is always good for at least double digits, it seems, and draws a really nice matchup against Kansas City. Amari Cooper has slowly amassed a really nice season, although last 3 weeks has finished under 10 points. Does finish the regular season as the number 13 wide receiver, so do not count him out. Jordan really did do something special at the deadline, and that was pick up Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is number 22 wide receiver on the year, but that is with him missing basically his first 3 games of the year. So it's safe to say that Chris Godwin is back, has finished with 29, 14, 10, and 22 points, and faces a nice Arizona Cardinal defense this week. TJ Hawkinson has the potential to be a difference maker, and this is where I would say that he has a potential to really pull away from Uncle Creepies, because on the bottom half of his lineup, where Team Uncle Creepies and Frank really has to get a lot out of guys who may not score a lot, Jordan's bread and butter is in his flex spots, as in his tight end spot, as TJ Hawkinson is his tight end, faces a nice Giants defense against tight ends. Derrick Henry at number 4 on the year. So Jordan has the number 2, 4, and 5 running backs in fantasy football on his team. Derrick Henry will probably draw a flex spot. start against a very, very nice Houston Texans defense. And Mike Williams right now in the flex spot, who we know has the potential to go off. As far as what he has to do, he's similar to Nate's Jans Cans. He has some decisions to make on his bench. He has Kenneth Walker, and he also has James Conner, who he can start anywhere in his lineup. They won't draw starts in the starting running back, but they might be considered for flex plays, as Kenneth Walker does draw a nice matchup against Kansas City. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out. I can't wait to see how it goes. Again, congratulations to those teams. And as we are wrapping up this recap, I have a couple of housekeeping items to talk about.
Housekeeping?
Don't think you're sleeping.
Housekeeping?
Could you come back in an hour?
Housekeeping, you want towel?
More towels. Need sleepy.
Housekeeping, you want mint for pillow?
Please go away. Let me sleep for the love of God.
With the regular season coming to a close, we know who will draft where up until the number 8 spot up until the number 7 spot in the order. The 2023 Fantasy Football Finer Things Club draft order will go as follows. Justice Beaver will draft first. Prison Mike will draft second. Big Boobs will draft third. Bums from the Dock will draft fourth. Captain Bruisin will draft fifth. And number 6 will be Prince Family Paper. Of course, if those teams have traded away those picks, the owner of those picks will now draft in those spots. And the 3rd and 4th place finish in the draft order will be determined by the 3rd place game. The winner of the 3rd place matchup will actually draw the higher draft spot, as we have in our league charter. Last thing to talk about is the side pot. Ladies and gentlemen, except there are no ladies, so only gentlemen, there is $140 still up for grabs for all teams, not just playoff teams, as we go into weeks 16 and 17. The team with the most points combined of weeks 16 and 17 will be the winner of the rollover and the remaining amount of the side pot winnings. All 10 teams are eligible to win $140. And so everyone set their lineups. Try to get the most points. It's not 195. It is just whoever scores the most between 16 and 17. Weeks 16 and 17 will win the $140. So anybody can win that. Best of luck to the 4 teams in the playoffs, and best of luck to all going for that side pot leftover. As we head into the holiday season and we talk about leftovers of the ham and the turkey, don't forget them side pot leftovers, baby. Everybody have a great week. Christmas week is here. Have a great time. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Have a great time with your families. Watch a lot of football as we get it on Christmas Eve this year. And have a great day, everybody.
What do you think having a 37-year-old?
We're on to Cincinnati. It's nothing about the past, nothing about the future. Right now we're preparing for Cincinnati.
Okay,